Now, former U.S. President Donald Trump is leading the Republican race in South Carolina, and the state will vote in Republican primaries in hours from now. Trump's main rival, Nikki Haley, who is a former governor of the state, is trailing with a margin in the surveys. But none of this has stopped the rivals from pulling their punches.
For Nikki Haley tomorrow is a vote for Joe Biden this November. That's all you're doing, is you're voting for crooked Joe Biden. A vote for Trump is a vote to fire crooked Joe and put America first and make America great again.
And Joe Biden calls anybody that doesn't support him, he calls them fascists. And Donald Trump calls anybody that doesn't support him vermin. What are we doing? That's not how we're supposed to be. That's not the way we're going to go forward. But even look, we need to be normal. Again, our kids want to know what normal feels like.
Now, South Carolina's primaries are open, and this means that any registered voter can take part in either the Republican or the Democratic primary, but not both. The Democratic primary took place earlier in February, which President Joe Biden won easily. Now, focusing on the Republican race, Trump has held several rallies in the state, but much of his campaigning has been done from courtrooms in New York, Washington, D.C. and Florida, where he faces a series of criminal prosecutions. And rather than hurting his image, his legal problems now seem to have galvanized more and more Republicans around his campaign. Opinion polls show more than 60% Republicans in the state are backing Trump as opposed to Haley's 30%. And Haley, meanwhile, could suffer an embarrassing loss if she can't win the state where she was the governor. Haley and her allies have far outspent Trump in advertising, spending nearly $15 million ahead of the South Carolina primary compared with $1.3 million spent on his behalf. Haley chose to stay in the race even after the two embarrassing losses, first in Iowa and then in New Hampshire. Now, will she drop out of the race after South Carolina or wait until Super Tuesday on March 5th? Remains to be seen. And our correspondent Susan Tehrani gets us all the latest details on this. Take a listen.
South Carolina primary voters will start going to the polls 7 a.m. on Saturday. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion that former President Donald Trump will win the state by a wide margin. Nikki Haley, the state's former governor, is running against him, and for now she's the only person standing in the way between a Trump-Biden rematch. She's made clear that even if she does end up losing her home state, she will continue to stay in the GOP primary race. She has the money, her donors are backing her, but what she hasn't been able to do is create the enthusiasm, the momentum needed to change the tides. At recent rallies or on TV interviews, for example, she often describes why neither President Biden or former President Donald Trump should be president. She declares herself as an alternative. During her rallies, she delivers many clever lines. Her audience seem to enjoy it. And while she talks about issues that Americans care about, like the economy, immigration, crime, even Ukraine, you don't hear her talk about how she plans on fixing them. Now, to be fair, Donald Trump also doesn't talk about policy during his rallies, but he does fire up his base. And for now, it seems the majority of the Republican Party have already embraced him as the front runner going into the general election. Now, it's important to note there are still many months between now and then, and anything could happen. But it's also important to note that more often than not, the candidate that wins South Carolina goes on to become the nominee. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.